Welcome to the Laverne Church of the Brethren's weekly audio message. Here at the Laverne Church of the Brethren, we create a Christian community called by Christ to be inclusive, caring, and peace-minded. We affirm that people of any race, ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, age, economic status, faith tradition, or life situation are welcome in our congregation. We believe in compassionate service, stewardship of creation, respect for diversity, and nonviolent reconciliation for differences among all people, nations, and faith traditions. We claim no creed but the New Testament as exemplified by the life of Christ. We strive to follow the way of Jesus. And through these efforts, we seek to grow ever closer to the mind and heart of God. And now let us ground ourselves as we enter into today's message.
Our scripture reading this morning is from Matthew 3, verses 13 through 17, from the New International Version. Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John. But John tried to deter him, saying, "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?" Jesus replied, "Let it be so now. It is proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness." Then John consented. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased."
Earlier this week, as I was contemplating today's text and sermon, I had to step away from my desk, and I came over to the sanctuary in order to hear the text in a different location and different setting. I wanted to see, I wanted to hear, and I wanted to experience the text as I was here in the sanctuary. And as I walked into the back of the sanctuary, I paused by the AV desk, and I was looking towards the pulpit and the choir loft, and my eyes settled on the window of the baptistry. And as I was watching the window, I began to imagine that scene in which Jesus was standing on the bank of the Jordan River and inquiring with John about baptism. After a few moments of thinking about that scene and standing at the back of the church, I walked down the aisle. And I came up the steps by the pulpit, turned and went up the steps to the choir loft, and then walked through this side door that leads into a hallway that gives you access to the baptistry. And I proceeded to walk down the descending ramp into the baptistry. And as I walked, I imagined that the baptistry was filled with water. And I could feel the coolness of the water surrounding my legs. And I could hear the water slush as I made steps. And as I got fully into the baptistry, I looked out the window over the congregation, and again, trying to imagine that scene by the Jordan River. As I stood there, I could hear John saying to Jesus, I need to be baptized by you, but you come to me? And I could also hear Jesus respond to John, let it be so for now. It is proper that we do this to fulfill righteousness. And then I could hear the splash of the water as John dipped Jesus' head into the Jordan River. And I could hear the water drip from Jesus' face and his hair, forming ripples in the water around his waist. And as I stood there, just as I can this morning, I noticed sunlight coming through these east windows, illuminating the sanctuary. And with the illumination of the sanctuary, I could hear the voice from heaven declaring, this is my Son, whom I love. With him I'm well pleased. And as I stand here this morning, I can hear those words again. This is my people. These are my children, whom I love, and with whom I'm well pleased. As I stood there, I could imagine the time of my own baptism and the other individuals who were baptized on that day. Now, although we were baptized separately, I believe we entered the water together. And we embarked on a journey together and are still on that journey. Can you recall the time of your baptism? Do you remember where it was? The pastor or pastors that were involved? Or other candidates who were being baptized that day with you? Or maybe you're from a tradition that doesn't baptize adults but infants. And maybe you hear stories of your baptism. Maybe you cried when the water touched your forehead. Or you remember times of consecration class. Whatever the scenario, I believe the same can be said of our collective baptisms, that we entered the water together. We may have been baptized at different times and in different places, but we entered the water together. And we stand shoulder to shoulder, even today. Last Sunday, we read in Matthew's Gospel the account of the Magi searching for, finding, and visiting with Jesus' family when he was very young. And then Matthew takes this giant step forward when we turn to the next chapter in the Gospel. And we've skipped through Jesus' formative years. Matthew omits Jesus' teenage years, and maybe for good reason, I don't know. And we're into adulthood. And Matthew picks up Jesus' story here. And we find Jesus approaching John for baptism. And what I find in this story is that Jesus' baptism reminds us that Jesus stands with us in the water. That Jesus stands by our side, and we're there shoulder to shoulder in the waters of baptism, or maybe more accurately, the waters of life. And Jesus is at our side. What a proclamation of good news. We're not alone on this journey. But Jesus is with us, in you and in and you. We're together, embodying the presence of Christ. It's in Jesus' baptism that I think we can begin to understand better the name that Jesus was given at his birth, Emmanuel, God with us. God with us. To me, that gives new meaning and understanding to baptism. Maybe that's what Jesus or God was saying, or the voice was saying from heaven. I am with you in every point in life. I appreciate Jan Richardson's description of Jesus' baptism, and that she writes, this drenched and dripping Messiah embodies and shows forth in fullness just how far God will go to provide for and restore God's people. It makes me wonder, how far is God willing to go today to stand with us, and not just with us, but especially those who are facing challenges? I believe, even in spite of all the detainments, harassments, and attacks, God is standing with us even today. As I stood in our baptistry, I recalled a time when I baptized a single father and his daughter, teenage daughter. To say it lightly or kindly, they were working through some challenging issues in their life. And they were trying to focus on smoothing out some rough spots in their relationship. And I remember the moment following the father's baptism, as he was standing up, soaking wet. I reached out to embrace him, and he said, I feel like a burden has been lifted from my shoulders. See, I believe the experience of baptism and his expression of faith, he found that God's presence was embracing him and his daughter, even as they struggled. He found a new assurance that he and they were not alone, but that Jesus was standing side by side and shoulder to shoulder with them as they made their way along the bumpy path of life. They weren't alone. They were not alone. That God accompanied them every step of the way. And that lifted his burden, or made it feel lighter at least. It didn't take it away, because they still struggled. But he found courage for the path and the journey. The Father's words remind me, or bring to life, the words found in Matthew's Gospel, the 2nd chapter, verse 6. And you, Bethlehem, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people. In life and in baptism, we're held by the shepherding care of God, and it's embodied in the life and ministry of Jesus. And we're surrounded by that. Just as your body is surrounded by water when you step into it. We can't get away from it. It's there, holding us. It makes me wonder, how might we stand with others and embody this same spirit of caring and shepherding? Jesus' baptism inaugurated his public ministry, in which he identifies and stands with humanity. In Jesus' baptism, he identifies with the faults and failures of humanity. He identifies with the pains and problems and the brokenness of everyone who stands on the bank of the Jordan River. And by wading into the water, Jesus claimed his place and space with us. For Jesus stands shoulder to shoulder with humanity and with us throughout this journey. We're not in it alone. When we're dealing with the messiness of life, you're not alone. It's in these waters, the waters of life and the waters of baptism, that we stand with Jesus and that we stand with one another. And it's the water that binds us and holds us together in love and compassion. We're bound in mutual concern, and we share a mutual responsibility for the well-being of one another. And not just one another in this room, those beyond these walls. Yesterday, I attended a planning meeting of local citizens, community leaders, and organizational leaders and clergy. We were gathered out of concern for Romero, a Latino worker who was picked up and incarcerated by ICE. I mean, he's worked and lived in this country for 10 years, and he's done so responsibly. But yet he was detained and incarcerated and has been treated inhumanely. He has medical issues, life-threatening medical issues, and they weren't being attended to until individuals visited the jail and advocated for better care. They reached out to news media, and a story was broadcast, and it called attention to his need, and that changed things. And now the community wants to gather publicly. I think it's the 21st. It's a Wednesday afternoon. A gathering in Pomona to draw further attention to Romero's case because he has a court hearing in mid-February. We want to come together in solidarity and in community for Romero and his family, advocating for his release and calling for better treatment of him, and not just him, for all those who have been illegally detained and picked up. Standing in the baptistry and looking out over the congregation, help me to realize a core truth of Jesus' baptism. Jesus emerged from the waters, empowered to confront injustice, empowered to heal the brokenhearted, empowered to challenge oppressive systems, to elevate the marginalized, and to proclaim God's kingdom, that we're all God's beloved. And I think in a similar fashion, our baptism sends us out into the world to follow the same path. Friends, we are connected to one another. And we're called to stand shoulder to shoulder and side by side as we deal with the turbulent times and waters of life. So let us stand together and proclaim, no one stands alone. The journey is long, and it's longer for some than it is for others. So let us go and stand with them and walk with them and help share the burden and let them know they're not alone. Amen.
We're so glad that you listened to the message today. If you're looking for an open and affirming, peace-loving, and justice-seeking congregation, consider visiting us for in-person worship on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. We'd love to meet you.